recovered from the floods that we've had today. Tonight on KnightCall we're going to be doing something a little different from our usual topics. We're going to cover something that's international in scope. 1 year ago this week, war broke out in Cyprus, and a great deal has happened in this year. With us tonight to discuss the developments in Cyprus is Mr. Kostas Koutsopoulos and Dr. Telemachos Mouschovias. Mr. Koutsopoulos was an assistant professor of mathematics at Rutgers, and he's an actuary for a large insurance company. Dr. Telemachos Mouschovias is a Greek-Cypriot. His parents are among the 200,000 refugees, and right now he is doing research in astrophysics at Princeton. Gentlemen, welcome to KnightCall.
Thank you.
I think we ought to get started by trying to review what has happened in Cyprus over this year. There have been a lot of events, so maybe you could tell us a little bit of what has happened so that the people know just where we stand at this moment.
Instead of going in any depth about events that I'm sure will come up later in your program, perhaps I should try to trace some key dates and events that happened on those days without a comment about them. On July 15, 1974, there was a coup against the legitimate government of Cyprus by the Cypriot National Guard. The coup was either planned or supported by the Greek military government. On July 20, Turkey invaded Cyprus and occupied a small part around the northern coastal town of Kyrenia. On the same day, the United Nations passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire and an end of the military intervention in Cyprus and withdrawal of all foreign troops from the island. On July 30, 1974, the foreign ministers of England, Greece, and Turkey signed the Cyprus ceasefire agreement. On that same day, Turkey issued the so-called Operation Order Number 1, which was the plan used by Turkish forces to capture nearly 40% of the island of Cyprus. What has the U.S. policy been during this period and to the present time? First, there was a tilt towards the military that overthrew President Markos. Then, when the Turkish invasion took place, there was a tilt towards Turkey. When Congress saw that the administration was not complying with American law, which provided that military aid to Turkey should have been cut off because it was used for offensive purposes against the Republic of Cyprus, it passed resolutions enforcing the aid cutoff. To make a very long story short, the U.S. Congress cut off military aid to Turkey on February 5, 1975. And the language of the resolution, I'm not really sure it's the correct name to call it resolution. It was just some action of the U.S. Congress. The language of that action was that the cutoff of aid to Turkey should be in effect until, quote, substantial progress, end quote, is made for settlement of the Cyprus crisis. Dr. Kissinger had attempted to obtain concessions from Turkey on Cyprus. However, he failed, and talks between Turkish Cypriots and Greek Cypriots began under the auspices of the United Nations. Since February 5, the administration has been trying to restore aid to Turkey, and that brings us to the present and the latest administration effort. Today there is a resolution in the House of Representatives. The number of the resolution is H.R. 8412, which effectively would allow, if passed, would allow the U.S. to sell unlimited quantities of weapons to Turkey.
Well, at this point, let me remind our listeners that their calls are welcome to ask us a question, or maybe they would like to make a comment on anything that we're saying, and the number is 932-7887. That number, once again, is 932-7887, and we do welcome your calls. Mr. Koutsopoulos, what is the chance of the Congress passing that bill to resume aid to Turkey?
Well, it's very difficult to say. In the past, Congress, has voted by very large margins, such as 300 to 100, in the House of Representatives. There were votes of 64 to 27 at some point in the Senate for cutting off aid.
Yes.
However, there has been so much lobbying by the administration recently, such tremendous pressure breakfast with the president and cocktails with Dr. Kissinger and so on, and Turkish senators coming over here, and lobbying throughout the halls of Congress, that the outcome is going to be very, very close. I simply can say.
Right. Okay. I'm sure we'll get more into that aid question a little later in the program. Mr. Mouschovijas, what are the conditions in Cyprus 1 year later now? Since your parents are refugees in Cyprus, you have direct contact more than most people in the United States. Just how bad are things right now in Cyprus?
Well, Cyprus as a country is bleeding to death, to my mind. The terror continues, and just so that I don't talk in abstractions, I have two cousins that during the last few months disappeared while they were working outside the village which borders the ceasefire line. They disappeared, nobody knows what happens to them. And just in case any of your listeners would like to check with the records in the United Nations and the International Red Cross, their names are Christoforos Mouschovias and Theodosios Giannakis. The misery of the refugees goes on. The few thousand missing persons have never been accounted for. There are more expulsions by the Turkish occupation forces of civilians that we are left behind the Turkish lines. The bitterness in the refugees grows stronger and stronger every day. I think it is interesting to quote, if I may, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who remarked lately that there is complete freedom of movement in the free part of Cyprus, but in the occupied part, people just cannot go where they want to go. I think that when an administration, whether legal or illegal, tries to restrict freedom of movement in the part of the country or in a country under its control, it means that it has something to hide. It's as simple as that. But I think that for those who measure human happiness in terms of dry numbers, let me give you some economic indicators before and after July 20, 1974 that can describe, I think, very vividly the conditions on Cyprus today. Before 1974, July 20, 1974, the gross domestic product at constant prices was increasing annually by about 7.1%. And the gross national product per capita was growing by 5.9%. Per capita income stood at $1,500 as compared to $392 in 1960 when Cyprus became independent. Over full employment prevailed for the 7th year in succession. Value added in agriculture increased by almost 100%. Tourist development was spectacular. Social services such as education, health, housing, and social security reached European standards. Now, what is there today? There are 200,000 refugees, 40% of the population of Cyprus. The 40% of the territory of the Republic of Cyprus is under foreign occupation. 75,000 Cypriots, which are about 35% of the economically active population, are unemployed. The most beautiful forests of Cyprus have been destroyed perhaps forever. 80% of the total citrus plantations are facing the danger of irreparable damage for lack of attention and irrigation. Hundreds of thousands of animals, sheep, cattle, poultry, pigs, died or will soon die, left unattended by their owners who were forced to flee for their lives. Industrial output has been reduced by 50%. I can go on and on, but I'm sure it won't serve much.
Yes, I think we should get into that a little later on, but right now we do have a caller on the line. Good evening, you're on KnightCall.
Yes, I would like to, if your two guests could possibly get into the reasoning behind the Cyprus invasion. Was the Turkish minority threatened? Is that the main reason?
I think they can answer that.
Well, I think that at least that's what Turkey had claimed. And to be honest with you, I really do not know what the intention of the people who overthrew President Makarios was regarding the Turkish minority of Cyprus. One has to be frank about it. It is, however, a fact that until July 20, the day Turkey invaded Cyprus, and this was widely reported in the American and other press, that not a single Turkish Cypriot was harmed. So if there was a threat, it certainly did not materialize before then. I think I'm answering your question directly, but if there is more, I'll be glad to go on.
Have we answered your call? Have we answered your question?
More or less, but the real reason, I don't think it has been explained. If it wasn't a threat of the minority, what exactly was it? Do you think it was United States involvement or what?
No, I really don't think so. It's my own personal view. There may be people who will disagree with me, but Turkey has had plans to partition and then annex Cyprus for almost 20 years now. It goes back to about 1957, when the first incident occurred between Greeks and Turks on Cyprus.
Excuse me, could you turn your radio down so that we can hear you better? Go ahead.
Okay. Is there a threat possibly to other islands in Greece?
Oh, absolutely. This is actually why I am concerned with the United States giving military aid to Turkey, restoring military aid to Turkey right now. I think at this, yes, you may know that the Prime Minister of Turkey during the invasion of Cyprus was Mr. Ecevit. Mr. Ecevit visited London recently, and the purpose of his trip was to show the British people that Turkey is a European nation, it's a civilized nation, it's a peace-loving nation. Now, I find it ironic because the same time that Mr. Ecevit was in London, the official newspaper of his party, Boris, had an article on the Greek islands. And if I may quote two sentences from it, it says the following. This is a quote. "Ceding the islands to Greece was a mistake in Lausanne and repeated after World War II. The shortest way of correcting this mistake is to reoccupy the islands. Of course, we will have to fight to achieve this." Now, I don't think I need to comment on this, do I?
Right. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your call. Do we have another caller on the line? Hello, you're on NightCall.
Hello. I keep hearing about, lately, all these things about the Greek lobby and how influential it is, about being able to cut off arms aid to Turkey and putting our bases in jeopardy.
Yes.
And what I'd really like to know is why the United States foreign policy should serve the interests of the Greek lobby, or if it does rather than the interests of the United States.
Yes, I read the reports myself about the Greek lobby, and I think it's really ironic. Some of the people who are part of the so-called Greek lobby are Senator Kennedy and Representative Rosenthal, not to mention Senator Goldwater. Now, I don't know what is Greek about these gentlemen, but what is called the Greek lobby consists of Americans. The fathers or forefathers of some of them came from Greece, perhaps, but all Americans came from somewhere. Only the American Indians were native to this land. I think that the issues should not really be muddied by name-calling. And the real issue here is a violation of a United States law by Turkey, the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. Nobody, the administration itself, did not deny that Turkey violated American law. Now, another point here is that I find it curious that nobody seems to object to Turkish senators coming over from Turkey and lobbying for restoration of military aid to Turkey. Yet, when American citizens are concerned about violation of the laws of this land, they are called names. Honestly, I feel that this is a blow below the belt.
Would you like to comment on that, Mr. Koutsopoulos, also?
Yes, I would. Particularly since I happen to be a United States citizen, you know, and Dr. Mouschkovias is not. The concern of Greek Americans is just as much for our, for our country here as it is for our brethren, on Cyprus. First of all, we definitely feel that care should be exercised on who gets aid. One of the reasons we got into this mess on Cyprus is because we were very indiscriminate in keeping company with the colonels in Greece. Then the State Department, turns right around and blames them. We should not go around giving aid to all the international thugs and cutthroats, whether they be the colonels in Greece or whether it be Turkey. we simply have to condemn aggression, and tyranny wherever it arises. Furthermore, when Dr. Kissinger refers to us as the Greek lobby, there's kind of an implication there that he has the divine revelation of what the United States interest is. Dr. Mouschovijas gave you a quote just recently in Mr. Echevit's newspaper, about that shows clearly the Turkish belligerence. I think what the State Department should be thinking about is the long-term stability in the Mediterranean. What is going to happen if we arm these people again? I mean, they're not going to be content with Cyprus. What next? How will that serve? How will that serve stability, or how will that serve NATO? We will really have NATO collapsing all over the place. Furthermore, the issue that we are defending with the Greek lobby, if that's what he wants to call us, is very clear. There was a United States resolution voted on by 102 nations, including the United States, and out of shame, including Turkey, saying that foreign troops should be removed from Cyprus, and that territorial integrity and sovereignty of the island should be respected. Now, what we would like to know is, why is the administration inconsistent? Do they really believe that Turkish troops should be removed? If so, what are they doing about removing them? How can they vote for such a resolution and at the same time fight the Congress tooth and nail about the restoration of aid to Turkey? We have law on our side, the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. We have morality on our side. We are fighting really for the for the morals of our country, of the United States, and we are not ashamed of it.
Mm-hmm. I think that answers that question. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your call. Mr. Koutsopoulos, I think that's an interesting point that you've brought up, and after our experiences in Vietnam, I think most people in the United States tend to shy away from international affairs. They would like us to retract into our own shell. So what do you say to these people? What course should the United States take, mainly to protect the United States from becoming involved, and yet to keep the peace in the world, and also to protect the rights of the Cypriots?
Certainly, I would agree with that point of view. I would be against military intervention anywhere, but why don't we speak out on the issues? What is our policy? This is the point I was making before. Is it what the United Nations resolution states, for which we voted? Why did we vote for that resolution? I would really like to know. I would like someone in the administration, to answer that question. Is that our policy, or is our policy, to give in to the Turkish demands and give them all the aid they want, regardless of what they have done or what they might do, in the future? In other words, the whole question is, we should take an issue. We should take a stand on those issues, yes. A moral stand. We should be the moral leader of the world, period. That, to my mind.
All right, and we have another caller on the line. Good evening, you're on NightCall.
Hello.
Hello. Go ahead, please. Turn your radio down. Go ahead.
Yes, radio is down.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. I'd like to make a comment about something that was mentioned a while ago concerning consistency in the administration's policies.
Yes.
It appears that the arms embargo has, at least the administration's point about it, has been proved correct. Is it possible that the arms embargo has made Turkey more stubborn regarding Cyprus?
Well, in what way do you say that it's been proven correct?
Well, Cyprus has been, it is Turkey's recent attitude about Cyprus, that is, there hasn't been much military activity that we know of. That's something that's making at least daily news media coverage.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be consistent with the administration's point of view to continue the arms embargo just for that reason?
Well, they seem to feel so, and I honestly, sometimes wonder if they actually believe what they, what they tell us. To my mind, no. I would like to make several points, as a matter of fact. First of all, Turkey has made it clear it will not budge an inch on Cyprus. It will not make any concessions. For anyone that has been reading the news all the way back to last September, there were articles in the Washington Post, articles and reports, in the New York Times. Generals, ministers, the Prime Minister have often said, you can give us the aid, you can cut off the aid, you can do anything you wish, we are not going to change our position on Cyprus. Now, as a matter of fact, going back to the Greek lobby question, their insolence insults me as an American. For instance, Prime Minister Demirel came out saying about the latest administration effort, he's satisfied with our efforts, but he's reserving judgment. Perhaps we will put too many restrictions, in the new aid and so on. Well, who are these aggressors, treating the United States like dirt? I really get upset about the ignominy and the humiliation that those scared little men down in Washington are putting us through. And I feel that at least our Congress should stand up for our laws and for what's right. My second point is that more than 6 months of aid produced nothing. The invasion was on July the 20th of last year. The aid cutoff was February the 5th. For 6 months, Turkey was getting aid and furthermore knew that the aid would be coming to an end. Congress's patience was going to be at an end one of these days. And they did not, make the slightest, even a gesture, nothing. Why should they bother to do this after the aid resumption? Another thing I would like to say is that the administration is really playing in self-fulfilling prophecies. This must be a favorite game of Dr. Kissinger. The picture would have been entirely different if the cutoff had been by the administration and not by Congress, and on July 21st, the day after the invasion. Had that been done, Turkey would have had second thoughts. But because Turkey knows that the administration has been fighting tooth and nail to restore the aid, and is really siding with Turkey, why should they make any concessions? This is at the root of the problem, and not the fact, that we have cut the aid off. I finally think that it would be a mistake to cut the aid off, because what has been hampering negotiations in Cyprus is a lack of bargaining balance. The Cypriot side has nothing to bargain with. And the aid is wrong in that instead of redressing the balance, giving the other side something to bargain with, it would even make Turkey stronger. It does not stand to reason any way you look at it.
Mr. Muschovias, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I have a small point to add here. I think that irrespective of possible hardening or softening of Turkish negotiating position by giving or not giving aid to them, why should one violate the American law? Why should that be a consideration as to whether the American law should or should not be respected? Whether Turkey wants to make concessions or not make concessions in Cyprus, it shouldn't be the concern of the United States as far as enforcing its own law.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it kind of clarified a few points. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, one more
Go right ahead.
observation. I think that perhaps if we're going to restore aid, it perhaps should go to the Cypriots and not to the Greeks. And if we want to get a balance, perhaps someone like the Cypriots could be the referees if they were strong enough.
I think that's a very good point.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your call. Let me just remind you that this is KnightCall, and the number, if you would like to make a comment or ask us a question, is 932-7887, and I believe we have another caller on the line. Hello, you're on KnightCall.
Hello?
Yes, you're on KnightCall.
Yes, I read the recent guest editorial in the New York Times.
Yes.
By Ross Dektash.
Yes.
The so-called Turkish Cypriot leader.
Right.
And I was outraged by some of his allegations. And what I'd like to know is just exactly who does he represent? Has he been elected by the Turkish Cypriots to any office? FN.
No, he has not.
He has not?
No, not. It's really, the Turkish Cypriot leadership has been imposed on the Turkish Cypriots ever since I can remember. It's actually, since you really are bringing Mr. Dektash up as opposed to policies of Mr. Dektash or the Turkish Cypriots or Turkey, perhaps, I think I had with me something. Yes, there are some very influential Turkish newspapers who recently published published some articles about Mr. Dekhtash.
Yes.
One of them is Milliet, and she accuses, or
let me get that down. Milliet?
Yes, Millyet, and accuses Mr. Dekhtash of trying to establish what the paper called a personal regime on Cyprus. And there is also another newspaper, Yenigun, Yenigun, that wrote the following, and I'll quote from it. Mr. Dekhtash is now trying to consolidate a system which guarantees permanent power for him. And the paper continued, the import trade of the Turkish community is carried out through the company in which Mr. Dekhtash has shares. Mr. Dekhtash and some of his friends have become shareholders in all the trade and financial institutions of the Turkish community. He is the president of the state and the Constituent Assembly, and at the same time a shareholder of ETI, which handles 80% of the community's import trade. He has accumulated vast profits, and the paper goes on with something which surprised me very much, and I quote again, if free elections were held today,
yes,
the chances of Mr. Dekhtash remaining in power would be negligible, end quote.
They would be, if elections were held today, his power would be negligible?
The chances of Mr. Dekhtash remaining in power would be negligible.
Oh. Oh, I see. Thank you very much.
Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, let me remind you again that this is KnightCall, and the number, if you would like to talk to us, is 932-7887. And let's take time out for this message.
Double up America, you can ride cheaper than one.
If you drive to work alone, it's costing you twice as much to commute as it should. And that's too much. Cut it in half. Take a friend. Double up America. Two can ride cheaper than one.
Double up America, you can ride cheaper than one.
A public service, U.S. Department of Transportation, this station, and the Ad Council.
Okay, welcome back to KnightCall. The number is 932-7887. My guests are Dr. Telemachos Mouschovias and Mr. Kostas Koutsopoulos, and the topic is Cyprus, which broke out into war 1 year ago this week. Now let's get down to something which one of the callers brought up, and that's the press. And he said that he hasn't read anything about any actions on Cyprus recently. And I think that the Greek community has expressed a great dismay at the coverage of the Cypriot crisis, charging that it is biased. What has been done to counter this?
Well, we are trying. First of all, I should say that there are some bright spots here and there. You know, there are exceptions, and I want particularly to mention the Trenton Times, you know, that have been publishing our letters and have also stressed some of the points we've been making here tonight, you know, in their own editorials.
Mm-hmm.
However, by and large, we haven't had much success. We do send letters to the Times, carefully thought out letters generally, and we've even had delegations. At least I personally took a delegation of several Greek professors down to the New York Times at one point, and tried to present one letter to them, you know, and bring some pressure, you know, so that they would publish it. And you know, absolutely nothing happened. I think you have some beautiful examples.
Well, would you say that the Times is
in recent articles? You know, there was a recent article, a recent report rather, from you know, Washington, July the 10th. The headline is "House Testimony Split on Aid to Turkey." There is a picture of Cyrus Vance and George Ball, and under the picture it is stated that both of these people testified against aid to Turkey. Then the report itself goes on and on with Mr. Sisko's arguments for aid to Turkey. It does not mention a single thing that either George Ball or Cyrus Vance said against the bill. In fact, if it weren't for the headline, you know, House testimony split on aid to Turkey, I would have never known that there was any opposite testimony, you know. That sort of thing. It's interesting, incidentally, that this is the Cisco argument, which was a rather inane argument, incidentally, if we have time to go into that, made the Times 2 days in a row, and not a line, you know, about what the opposition had to say.
Okay, I think you've made the point. I think we have a caller on the line. Hello, you're on NightCall. Hello? Hello, you're on NightCall.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I've heard the argument that it's against American law to provide aid to Turkey after the invasion of Cyprus. Is it really illegal?
Can I take that?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, the law states that if military aid is used for offensive purposes without prior permission by the United States, then the aid code shall be immediately suspended. I think that is very clear, but since, first of all, I am not an American citizen and my word cannot be taken as the word of an authority on American law, Dr. Kissinger himself and the legal experts of the State Department agreed that aid to Turkey violates American law. The New York Times reported on September 20, 1974, that Dr. Kissinger, in an exchange with Senator Eagleton, said that let me quote the exact words actually, the dominant interpretation within my legal department is yours, Senator Eagleton, end quote. Everybody knows what Senator Eagleton's interpretation of whether Turkey violated or did not violate American law is. But I think there is another precedent in which the United States suspended aid to other countries, and there was no indecision then. I'm referring to the case of India and Pakistan in 1965, at which time the Johnson administration cut off aid to both countries because both of them used it offensively against each other. And if that's not enough, I think in its recent issue, Time magazine has said, I cannot quote it from memory, but it said something substantially the same with what I have just said for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Does that answer it? Thank you very much. Okay, let me remind you once again that the number is 932-7887, and we do welcome your calls. Mr. Koutsopoulos, why don't we get back to the Cisco argument? Exactly what is it, if you could explain it to us briefly?
Well, the Cisco argument was that Greece also has sent arms to Cyprus, you know. Now, it may, I do not really know if American arms, you know, were sent to Cyprus from the Greek side. But I think the argument shows you, you know, that the administration is really in trouble as far as coming up with something is concerned. It's not so much a question of whether the arms were there. If they were there, they were because the Cyprus government, you know, requested to have some arms over there, I suppose. Which is totally different from using these arms offensively and killing people. I think, you know, this is an argument which shows how you can distort or obfuscate the issue, you know, by simply by saying something which could be true, but which is kind of irrelevant in some ways. If American arms used by Turkey killed or caused to be missing or wounded the equivalent of 6 million Americans. If those events had taken place here, we would have 6 million victims. Now, why should this be compared with some arms that the colonels, you know, sent to Cyprus or did not send to Cyprus? A very shallow argument.
Kostas, may I interrupt? Yeah. I really think that one has to be much clearer on that issue. I don't know if I'm expressing your view. I have the feeling from previous conversations with you that I am, that if indeed Greece violated American law by whatever action, I really think that the law should just take its course.
Oh, of course.
We shouldn't.
Of course.
Now, whether it did or not, nobody bothered to explain and at what time and how. But if Greece violated American law, my God, We are not here to apply to different standards for Turkey.
The only point is, though, that the argument is not brought in the sense that aid should be suspended to Greece. I wouldn't argue with that. But the argument is brought to justify another unholy end, you know.
Now let's go back to the phones again. Hello, you're on NightCall. Hello, you're on NightCall.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yes. I would like to ask a question.
Sure.
Yes, I would like to know who is responsible for who is man in the United States responsible for sending guns to Turkey?
Gentlemen, would you like to respond to that?
Well, there is an administration that is running the country. I don't know if there is one single person that is really running this aspect of the administration, but it comes as an administration policy.
Well, I think maybe the question was, how did she get them in the first place? Because of being in NATO, you know.
Well, it had to be one man was influenced by Turkish government in the United States.
Well, I wouldn't know that. I don't move in those circles, you know. If I moved in those circles, I might, you know, yield some influence or something.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
There may be something really. I mean, we've heard the argument, after all, that it is to the interest of the United States to give arms to Turkey. Now, nobody has bothered to define what this interest really is. Mr. Koutsopoulos here earlier took up the issue of stability, long-term stability in the Mediterranean, and if that's the interest of the United States, he was arguing quite effectively, I think, that the interest of the United States is not being served by giving arms to Turkey. And as I quoted from a Turkish newspaper, which represents Mr. Ecevit's official voice, essentially, his party at least, they have plans to take over the Greek islands. Now, if that's the interest of the United States, fine, let the United States pursue it, but I don't really think that is the interest of the United States.
Well, does the United States have many military bases in Turkey?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They do, all right.
They have
with these arms, would they be large, like airplanes and missiles, or would they be small?
It includes airplanes, all right, and tanks and replacement equipment.
Seems to me if you let airplanes go, it's just like killing Greece.
Well, I'm afraid we both, Kostas and I, agree with you, and that's why we are here.
With you, you know.
Well,
Yes.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your call. This is NightCall, and we do welcome your calls. The number is 932-7887. Just where do we stand in the Mediterranean now as far as stability with Cyprus and with the other Middle East crisis? Where do you think the United States stands as far as stability? What effect can she have in the Mediterranean?
I really don't know. You know, the situation is extremely volatile, and of course everyone keeps saying, you know, that Greece is not prepared, that she cannot afford war. But I keep wondering, well, I mean, you know, those things change. Greece was left militarily unprepared by the colonels, but the colonels are there no longer. You know, Greece now has a democratic government, and they don't consult me either, but I would think that, you know, one of their first tasks would be to arm the country again, and like any other country, you know, they will just take so much pushing. When they're ready, anything might happen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
This is why some foresight is required, you know, in our foreign policy. It's not just a question of what's happening today, what might happen tomorrow, you know, unless we plan and, you know, look after those things.
Yes. Mr. Mouschovias?
Stability, if one can call what is today, the conditions on Cyprus today as stable, stability will not last if there is injustice. One has to come to the root of the problem and eliminate that for a situation to be called stable. If we just patch up the problem, which fundamentally is between Cyprus, and by the way, Cyprus is an independent nation. The problem on Cyprus is not between Greece and Turkey, it's between Cyprus and Turkey. And unless that is well resolved, and unless Turkey learns to respect the territorial integrity of Cyprus, which is a provision, a fundamental provision of membership in the United Nations, I don't think the situation can ever become stable. As long as there are Cypriot refugees, as long as there are children running around barefooted, not having anything to eat, no school to go to. I hardly would call the situation stable. The bitterness someday is going to just boil, and I think Cyprus, unless the problem is solved very soon, is going to be the hotbed of the Mediterranean. It is not now.
Right, so you would say it's just a matter of time then, unless the problem is resolved in some manner.
Certainly.
Okay, I think we have a caller on the line. Let's go to the phones. Hello, you're on NightCall.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I've been listening to the program, and in regard to the United States interest in Cyprus, I've been wondering whether our interest is to protect Israel, because Cyprus is so strategically located in relation to Israel.
Yes, if you'd like to comment on that.
Well, I think I would like to comment on that. Let me assume, I don't know what the interest of the United States is, but let me assume that it is to protect Israel. Now, there is the record, right, during the last Arab-Israeli war, Turkey did not allow American planes to land in Turkey and then carry whatever they were going to carry to Israel. So if that's the objective of the United States, I don't think it's been served by the current policy.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
I quite agree. You know, the Turkey is generally so unreliable that I don't think that could be the objective of the United States.
Okay, let me remind you again that this is NightCall, and the number is 932-7887. And let's take time out for this message.
This is Estelle Parsons. In the film Bonnie and Clyde, we played gangsters who held up everything from banks to gas stations. Now, you're lucky to find a gas station open because of the energy crisis. But if we're not foolish with our fuel, we'll all have more. So let's drive at 55 or slower. Let's get up carpools and turn thermostats down to 68 degrees or lower. In short, don't be fuelish.
This message from the Federal Energy Office and the Advertising Council.
Okay, we're back on NightCall. The number is 932-7887, and we are talking about the situation in Cyprus, what has happened in 1 year since war broke out on Cyprus. And Mr. Mouschovias, could you tell us something more about the situation in Cyprus right now, as far as the government? What is the situation with the government now in Cyprus?
The government on the free part of Cyprus is desperately trying to survive, not the government to survive, to help the people survive. When you have virtually half of your people as refugees, and you depend entirely on humanitarian aid from other countries, it is very difficult to make long-range plans, although the government has begun making them. But the other point, I think, which Phil perhaps mentioned earlier when I was numbering and enumerating things as they are on Cyprus today, is that the free part of Cyprus contains only 30% or less of the resources of the island. So when you get 80% of the people and give them less than 30% of the resources, your main problem and perhaps the only objective is survival.
Yes, well, what is the percentage of Cyprus that is free right now?
Well, it's a little over 50% in terms of land. But most of the resources in the industry and the tourist attractions are on the northern part of Cyprus.
I see.
A very extensive mountain range is in the southwest.
Okay. Mr. Koutsopoulos, could you tell us maybe what effect that the resumption of aid to Turkey would have on the situation in Cyprus at this point? Would it explode? Is the situation that volatile in this point in time?
Well, it's hard for me to predict just exactly what might happen. My best guess would be that Turkey would probably make some. As I understand this so-called compromise, that's pending in Congress now, in the House specifically. It calls for the president, to report some kind of progress every 60 days, I think. And I would assume that I mean, it's not inconceivable that Turkey, would withdraw a couple of hundred soldiers out of the 40 or 43,000 or whatever it is that they have there, or maybe allow seven of the 200, just not 7,000, 7 of the 200,000 refugees, to return home or whatever, just to keep aid going. I really don't think that, regardless of what the administration may be telling us, I don't think that Turkey is prepared, for whatever reason, maybe because they have had plans, to annex Cyprus, the way they annexed Alexandretta, back in the 30s. The scenario is almost identical. I think Dr. Mouschovijas might be able, to tell you more about that. He knows the history a little better. I don't think that they're prepared, to go even not halfway, but 1/10 of the way, toward the settlement. And in those, under those circumstances, I really don't see, what can happen unless the United States puts pressure even beyond the aid cutoff on Turkey, in an attempt, to make them be a little more reasonable.
Turkey regards the aid by the United States as their right.
Exactly.
And it is non-negotiable, they say. So I don't think any concessions will follow, but even if they were, they will be very nominal. But what is certain to follow, I think, is that they will know, the Turkish government will learn that blackmail and aggression pays. They attacked the Republic of Cyprus. They are there illegally in violation of United Nations articles of the Charter of the United Nations. The next step, of course, would be to feel quite proud of themselves, as I'm sure they are feeling now, feel more confident about their military might, and as I quoted earlier from the Turkish newspaper, just begin another adventure in the Aegean.
Okay, Anna, we have another caller on the line. Hello, you're on NightCall.
Hello, yes. So far the discussion tonight is centered on Greece, Turkey, and Cyprus. But do we have any information on other nations, the rest of the world's opinion on the situation?
I think I have some. I received, as a matter of fact, from a friend of mine on Cyprus, a bulletin. Of course, the bulletin is issued by the government of Cyprus, so I caution you that is not entirely an unbiased opinion. And the bulletin reports on a trip by President Makarios in the Third War. And he got an amazing response and promises for help in the United Nations, economic help and other. The Third War is just standing solidly with Cyprus, with the free Cyprus. There is no complaint that I as a Cypriot I could express against any of the Third War countries.
I see. Can I ask one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
Since this is the, unfortunately, 1-year anniversary of the Cyprus invasion,
right,
is anything being planned as far as another demonstration in Washington or something to bring it into the public eye?
Yes, next Sunday there will be a memorial service. Archbishop Iakovos will be there, and in Washington. There will be a memorial service in Washington, and Archbishop Iakovos, will officiate. Many of us are planning to go down, and we are taking petitions with us, and all the signatures we can get, and so on and so forth. Many people will be staying, as a matter of fact, overnight, so that we can be there on Monday, which is most likely when the House vote will come, Monday or Tuesday, I would expect.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your call. Now, let's get into something else which I think is on the mind of at least many of the Greek-American people, and that's Dr. Kissinger, who, I don't know, I think many people would say he's done more harm than good. How do you feel on that situation with Dr. Kissinger? Do you think he has been a personality that has helped solve problems in the Mediterranean as far as Cyprus especially is concerned, or do you think there should be a change in our diplomatic relations somehow?
Well, I don't really feel in discussing any issues one should ever comment on somebody's personality, but if Dr. Kissinger is taken as representing or formulating the United States foreign policy on Cyprus, then I would say that he managed to make enemies out of both the Greek people and the Turkish people. If at least he had won one of the two countries, I might say, or some kind of interest of the United States in quotations might have been served irrespective of moral principles, irrespective of American laws, but just to make enemies out of both countries, I don't know what interest it serves.
No, I would like to comment on that too. I think Dr. Kissinger is the poorest choice of a Secretary of State the United States has ever had. And the reason for that is that he does not think like an American openly. He does not express himself through the UN. He is secretive. He puts power before principle. He should have been Metternich's aide in the 19th century. This country was founded on principle. Principle has to come. We still believe, we Greek Americans, or the Greek lobby, or whatever you want to call us, that right makes might. We should not be afraid to say what's right, and things will somehow arrange themselves. This would have been the faith, of our founding fathers, right? And I think he's thoroughly unsuitable for a Secretary of State of this great country.
Okay, Dr. Kissinger has stated that Turkey is important to the United States and that we cannot afford to jeopardize our national security by displeasing Turkey. What can you say to that argument?
Do you mind if I read something? I sent very recently, a few days ago, a letter to a newspaper on the very same subject, and I think I can express my thoughts on the issue much more clearly in writing than actually pulling them out of my head now. Would you mind if I read?
No, go ahead, please.
It has the title, National Security Incompatible with Aid to Turkey. Two new elements have been injected by the Ford administration in its fervent struggle to circumvent the existing law, which provides that military aid to Turkey, quote, shall be immediately suspended, end quote, because it was used for offensive purposes against the island Republic of Cyprus. The first is national security, and the second is an odd coupling of aid to Greece, the Cypriot refugees, with the renewal of arms shipments to Turkey. National security does and must concern the American public. It is precisely for this reason that it must not be used as a catchphrase whenever an administration desires to rally support for questionable objectives or to try to purify obviously illegal actions. Important constituent elements of national security are territorial integrity, the safeguarding of American institutions, laws, ideals, and principles, not the least cherished of which is national and individual freedom. If the U.S. does not yield to the Turkish blackmail, the worst possible outcome for the U.S. would be for Turkey to close all U.S. bases on its soil. Turkey has already declared that NATO bases can stay. How would this affect American national security? The answer was provided by Dr. Kissinger on June 23, and this is an exact quote. An ally whose perception of its national interest changes will find us prepared to adapt or end our treaty relationship. No ally can pressure us by a threat of termination. We will not accept that its security is more important to us than it is to itself. End quote. To the words of Dr. Kissinger, one may add that the proximity of Turkey to the Soviet Union does not automatically render the U.S. bases and intelligence installations on Turkish soil indispensable. Technological advances have made it possible for high-quality cameras and communications equipment to be installed on satellites, a sophisticated network of which is employed by both the United States and the USSR for intelligence purposes. The recent photographs of alleged Soviet installations in Somalia could hardly be obtained from ground facilities, however near. It would be ironic if national security could indeed be served by restoring military aid to Turkey, an action whose immediate consequence would be to provide the means by which Turkey would keep depriving the island nation of Cyprus of the very freedoms which are integral parts of the concept of national security. If an administration acts on foreign policy matters in a manner that circumvents American laws and insults fundamental American ideals, what is the guarantee that actions by the same administration on domestic matters will not exhibit the same tendency? As for the aid to the Cypriot refugees, I am sure that I am speaking for all 200,000 of them when I say that, although they were touched by the outpouring of compassion by the American people, the plan of the administration, that is, to tie aid to them to restoration of military aid to Turkey, adds insult to the injury. The Cypriot refugees do not want to burden the already overtaxed American people, and they cannot sell their conscience and their freedom for any amount of dollars. All the Cypriot refugees ask of the American people is to make it possible, by writing to their elected representatives, for them to return to their homes, which are now occupied by Turkish troops equipped with American-made weapons.
Okay, and at this point, let's take time out for this message.
Pork chops double on the gravy, walk-in.
Hey, Patterson, you've got a lot of hungry people out there.
Patterson, you call this clean. You're making me look bad.
One clean plate coming up. Looking good.
Hey, Patterson, more forks, pronto.
Clean fork coming up.
Paging Dr. Patterson. Dr. William Patterson to emergency.
Dr. Patterson, the patient has a severe scalp laceration. I've cleaned the wound.
We'd better get some x-rays on this.
Right away, doctor.
All right, get me the suture set, and I'll need an assistant.
Yes, doctor.
William Patterson was a dishwasher. Now he's a doctor. The United Negro College Fund has helped other black students change the course of their lives at UNCF colleges. Thousands have become doctors, engineers, teachers, perhaps changing the course of your life. But today, there just isn't enough money. Please support the United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. A public service message of this station and the Advertising Council.
Okay, we're back on NightCall. Mr. Mouschovia, do you have something to tell us?
Yes, I really think I do, and this is an important point in the sense that perhaps everybody has gotten the impression from press reports or other sources that the Turkish people unanimously have supported the invasion against Cyprus. I have here in front of me some statements from Mr. Levent Dalyan, D-A-L-Y-A-N, who was a delegate from Turkey to the international conference in London for the implementation of United Nations resolutions on Cyprus. And I would like to quote a few of a part of the statement of this gentleman. He said, Mr. Echevit said that the war against Cyprus was a peaceful anti-imperialistic operation, but we state that it was a war of oppression. We called on the patriotic officers to resist this act of aggression against the Turkish and Greek-Cypriots. Many patriotic officers refused to participate in this misadventure. 20 of them were court-martialed and shot in Mersin. This gentleman, I repeat, it was a from Turkey, delegate to an international conference in London for the implementation of United Nations resolutions on Cyprus. And he went on to say the following: our stand is clear. We recognize the right of the people of Cyprus to self-determination. We believe in one independent and sovereign Republic of Cyprus in which Greeks and Turks can live together in a democratic system. The United Nations resolutions must be implemented and the Turkish troops must return to Turkey. We are putting pressure on the reactionary government of Turkey for this purpose. Enter.
Okay, I think that's about all the time we have on NightCall this evening. I'd like to thank Dr. Telemachos Mouschovias and Mr. Kostas Koutsopoulos for being our guests tonight, and I think they've enlightened us on the subject of Cyprus. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for us here at NightCall, you can write to us at NightCall, WRSU-FM, 126 College Avenue, New Brunswick, New Jersey, 08903. NightCall will return next week at 9, again on Monday night, with Dave Yuckman. Next is Jersey Jazz, another presentation of the WRSU Educational Programming Department. I'm Thucydides Markos. Take care and be good. Thank you for listening this evening.